Donnie and Dolly, the team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
All right, our guest of the day on this Friday, including Thomas Drance, standing by, brought to you by Langley Chrysler. Not just one guest, but two guests today. Don't miss the game because your car needs servicing. Langley Chrysler will pick up, service, and drop off your car so you don't have to miss the action. Valet service only at langleychrysler.com. Delaney's OK Tire and Langley inbox. There's a lot of people saying this particular submission from Big Jeff, just ahead of Thomas here. Nice to see Ryan's camera is working again.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
We had an issue yesterday. We just had darkness there. I kind of liked it. It was kind of like the Marlon Brando scenes from Apocalypse Now, just in the shadows.
Just a voice?
I enjoyed it, yeah. Not to compare you with one of the great actors of all time.
I was going to say.
Lightning over the Canucks 4-2. Canucks continue their 5-game road trip, 0-2 so far. Tomorrow in Carolina. Here to talk about it from The Athletic, as always, on a Friday. Thomas Drance, how are you, sir?
The horror! Hey, Colonel Kurtz from Apocalypse Now. That's another good bald man for
that's good.
Really well to put into his file.
That's good.
A good one, Thomas, my friend.
Very good. There's a documentary, I believe it's called The Hearts of Darkness, on the making of Apocalypse Now, which is must watch if you loved that movie. You might even love that even more. Okay, on to hockey here. Lightning over the Canucks 4-2. Bruce Boudreau pointed to his power play as a major problem last night. No surprise there. 0 for 4, 1 registered shot. What did you see, Thomas? And what's the problem there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a believer in the Canucks power play, typically speaking. It wasn't a good performance last night, but I believe that this is a power play that should be, based on their underlying profile, based on what they generate in a typical game, that should be an above average, maybe even a top 10 NHL power play. I think we all believe in the skill players. My biggest takeaway, honestly, was Boudreau's commentary because, gentlemen, I thought he sounded really frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he sounded like a coach who was maybe a couple of games away from, really maybe having some critical commentary for his skill guys. That's what it sounded like to me anyway, post-game yesterday. And look, he had cause to do it. The power play wasn't sharp. I think they were sloppy. I don't think they set up well enough. I think the Lightning did a phenomenal job. I thought Victor Hedman had a particularly good game. Just snuffing out Canucks offensive opportunities, including when they had the man advantage. So we'll see how they do against Carolina and Washington. They're going to need more from their special teams, no question about it. When you look at these 2 losses in Florida, you see a team that played really well 5-on-5 and then sort of got hit in the mouth by special teams, right? They were sort of let down by their special teams. I mean, that's a recipe that sounds eerily familiar to those of us who watch this Canucks team play in October and November, right?
Yep.
They're going to need more, but really my biggest takeaway was that Boudreau sounded frustrated. He sounded like a guy who knows he needs an awful lot more from his top players.
Yeah, there was a different tone. Good observation there, Thomas.
Yep, that's true.
What did Tampa Bay show you? For me, Thomas, just, Gaudreau, Coleman, Gord, that third line leaves, a lot of people thinking they wouldn't be the same team. They look pretty good. What did you see?
I think their bottom 6 is a little bit slow. I think they are more severely diminished than their performance in the standings would indicate, right? You look at the NHL standings, it's like the Lightning are an elite team again. I thought their bottom 6 group looked really slow. And you don't want to look slow against the Canucks, right? I mean, we've seen teams like Pittsburgh and faster teams give this team a lot of trouble because the Canucks don't have a ton of team speed. And I thought, with Tampa Bay's bottom 6 on the ice, they looked like they didn't necessarily have the pace to keep up always. I thought, for example, that some of last night's game was there was this dynamic where the Lightning were able to generate really well when they were in zone, but it looked like they struggled to cope with the Canucks in transition. That to me is a big red flag, because we just saw the Panthers team speed sort of turn the game by keeping the Canucks completely bottled up in their own end with sort of a neutral zone forecheck that really did damage. The Panthers and the Leafs both do that really well. They transition really well. They've got speed on all four lines. I think Tampa's going to need an upgrade in that area if they're going to go for the three-peat. It's going to be really tough. I was not super impressed by Tampa Bay overall, even though their quality, especially when the Kucherov line was on the ice or when Victor Hedman was on the ice. I mean, they have so many weapons. There's so many great players on that team. Their quality showed. I thought that especially once the Canucks started chasing the game in the third, they began to get a ton of odd man opportunities and breakaways later in the game. That's veteran savvy showing through. I mean, these guys know how to win. They're great players, but I do think they're missing that third line, and really it was their second line that they were able to lean on last year. And I think they need more pace at the bottom end of their forward group desperately if they're going to win again.
Thomas, I'll tell you what the Canucks desperately need. They need Horvat, Garland, Miller, Besser, Pettersson to start scoring. You're not going to beat the top teams without your top six scoring. What's going on there?
Well, yeah, I mean, I thought the Miller line didn't have a great game, right? And I really like that Miller, Pearson, Besser line. I'm not surprised to see Bruce Boudreau go back to it. I thought that was their best line in the first 6 games or first 5 games before Besser left the lineup for COVID protocol. That was their best line, and they didn't generate a ton last night. They didn't have a lot of zone time. They didn't have a lot of that sort of down low cycle shift game that they sort of feasted on in their first 5 games as a line together. So, I thought that line had a bit of a letdown evening for me anyway. But I thought the Pettersson, Garland, Horvat line was fantastic. I mean, I thought that line generated at will. And, I've sort of thought a lot that like Horvat with Garland has been a mix, Rick, that hasn't necessarily like caught fire. It's like they've been less than the sum of their parts together. They're both fantastic players, but together I felt like it hasn't necessarily blended. With Pettersson on the other wing, all of a sudden it felt like one thought, like one single thought, like it was woven together, and all of a sudden they were generating a ton. I thought that line looked really dangerous. I hope we see it again in both games over the weekend. Give them some run. They're going to score. Just a matter of time for them.
Thomas, the GM search, it's getting down to the final strokes. Patrick Alvin, Scott Mellanby, and a name that's popped up in the last 24 hours is Sean Burke. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'd heard that through the grapevine. I couldn't confirm it. Kudos to the new Canucks front office. I mean, this search has been tough to report on, Rick? Like, we've been making calls. We've been doing our usual thing. We've been struggling to get names. And Sean Burke was one out there in the ether that I sort of got from industry contacts, like not affiliated with the club, but just, the clucking hens in the industry. And interesting, like a very interesting one. I think that Burke's done a lot of different things. He's been a goalie coach. He's been Hockey Canada executive. It's an interesting name for sure. We're still waiting, though, to hear, other than the brief sort of moment where we thought the Canucks might try and push to get Chris McFarland, we haven't heard many progressive names really affiliated with the general manager search. We're hearing a lot of guys with sort of scouting backgrounds, or different types of backgrounds like that, as opposed to, lawyers or managers or cap guys or big picture strategy guys, hockey business guys associated with the role. I'd be really curious to know who the other 2 names are, Rick, because I do think that that's an aspect that this organization is desperate for. And I know Rutherford brings a lot of that himself, but, when he's been at his best, right, when he was at his best in Pittsburgh, he had guys who matched that description in Jason Botterill and Jason Karmanos as 2 of his most trusted lieutenants. I'd love to see him recreate that dynamic here. I think that would be a great thing for the franchise. To this point, we haven't really had a candidate's name surface that matches that description. All of that said, though, I do think it's a good look for Rutherford and the new Canucks front office that, the cards are being played so close to the vest, or held so close to the vest, as it were, as this search proceeds.
Okay, you interviewed Derek Clancy, new Canucks assistant GM. What was your takeaway there?
Well, I was really impressed, Donnie, to be totally honest with you. Derek Clancy's from Newfoundland. He's from St. John's, Newfoundland. And I was really impressed by the straightforward communication style. And that matches a lot of what I've heard about Derek Clancy. I've heard, not a lot of black and white with him, that he's a very hard worker, that he's an old school evaluator. I thought he cut to the chase. I thought he was very clear about what his intentions are, what his process is, what his philosophy is. I thought he came across really well in our conversation. I hope that read on the page. And of course, you can go read a full Q&A with Derek Clancy at theathletic.com. And look, clearly changes are coming, right? Changes in what this club values, how they evaluate players, how they scout, probably the makeup of the scouting department. He mentioned support staff as something that he was also reviewing. There's a lot of work to be done as Rutherford puts his stamp on this organization. It's very clear that Clancy is in the weeds, being sort of his eyes and ears on some of that work as they build out the rest of the front office. And at some point, changes are coming. But I also thought he was very clear in indicating that, him and Jim Rutherford, with Rutherford, of course, setting the direction, need a little bit more time to get their sort of arms around what this team is, what direction they should go in, and what else they need behind the scenes to make this franchise a winner.
Thomas, have you written an autobiography?
I haven't, but I'm worried that I know where this is going, Rick. And
I was in
Ryan. Put the photo up.
Ryan, get it up.
Say things we can't take back.
Oh, there it is. Because I was in a bookstore at Christmas, and I swear I thought you had written an autobiography. Wow.
No one wins alone, and that's a lesson he learned in Vancouver.
And by the way, he does talk about Vancouver in the book. And, there's some interesting stuff in there. What?
I hope so.
Rick, I went down. It was in 1998, and I won this raffle to have a press box experience. I was a 10-year-old kid or what have you. And it was the game that Matthias Oland got concussed by Rob Ray.
Oh, right.
And Brad May attacked Rob Ray. They had beef over it for 15 years, but it was this brawl-filled game. And I'm standing outside the Canucks locker room, and Mike Keenan is tearing into his team, and I can hear it outside. And I remember walking in, and Messier was the first person to talk to me. I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I getting into? Right, an 11-year-old kid, and couldn't have been a nicer guy. Had a really good experience with him as a young fan. So for everything negative that gets said about him, most of it fair during his Canucks tenure, I do have a positive memory of him.
Oh yeah, I mean,
you're 11 years old. What an opportunity! What a memory that must have been.
It was fantastic. I saw Dave Pratt doing TSN, and I thought,
doesn't get better.
Yeah. Well, are you the same age as Henderson? What's going on here?
Yeah. Early 30s.
Yeah. You got a way to go to catch us.
Same as Rick and I. Yeah. Thomas, next week. Thanks so much, sir.
Thanks, boys. Cheers.